My name is Haley Bennett. I'm 34 years old, and last Thanksgiving, I drove 5 hours through a snowstorm to surprise my family at the cabin I had been helping them pay for. I arrived carrying a homemade pecan pie, 2 bottles of wine, and gifts I had bought for everyone. When I knocked, my younger sister opened the door only 3 inches. Warm light spilled across the porch, and behind her I could hear laughter, silverware, and the football game playing inside. She looked at the pie, then at me, and smirked. "You were never invited," she said. "We're keeping it small this year." Before I could answer, she closed the door in my face. I stood there for 10 seconds, listening as someone inside asked whether I was gone. Then they laughed. I returned to my car without knocking again. 15 minutes later, my phone buzzed. Her husband had accidentally sent me a message meant for someone else. What a clown! She actually showed up. Beneath it was a photo of my entire family raising glasses around the Thanksgiving table. My place had been filled by one of their wealthy friends. That was when something inside me became perfectly still. I opened my banking app and canceled the mortgage payment for the cabin, my parents' insurance transfer, my sister's car payment, the utilities, and every subscription connected to my card. Then I froze the emergency account they had been using without permission. By sunrise, I had 62 missed calls. The final voicemail came from my mother. She was no longer laughing. "Haley, please don't do this. We could lose everything." What she didn't know was that I had already discovered why they excluded me, and the unpaid bills were only the beginning. Before I tell you what happened after that, tell me where you are and what the weather is like. Where you are. I just want to know how far my story can travel. I didn't answer any of the calls. I drove away from the cabin with the untouched pie secured in the passenger seat and my phone vibrating in the cup holder every few seconds. My mother called 11 times. My sister called 19. Her husband called from 3 different numbers. Even my father, who rarely contacted me unless he needed something fixed, left 4 voicemails. None of them asked whether I had survived the storm. None apologized for leaving me outside in freezing weather. Every message was about money. The mortgage payment is scheduled for tomorrow. The car company says the transfer was reversed. Your mother's insurance could lapse. You can't punish everyone because your feelings got hurt. That last message came from my sister. I nearly laughed. My hurt feelings had apparently become powerful enough to threaten their entire lifestyle. The truth was, I had been funding that lifestyle for almost 6 years. It started when my father's contracting business lost a major client. My parents told me they needed temporary help with their mortgage. I agreed to cover 3 months. 3 months became a year. Then my sister and her husband announced that they were struggling after his restaurant investment failed. I paid off 2 credit cards and covered the down payment on their SUV because my sister claimed she needed a safe vehicle for future children. There were never any children. There was, however, a second designer handbag 2 weeks after I sent the money. Whenever I questioned an expense, my mother reminded me that I was the successful daughter. "You're the one who can handle it," she would say. "Your sister has always been more sensitive." Sensitive was the family's favorite word for selfish. Responsible was their word for exploitable. I had spent years accepting those definitions because I believed generosity might eventually earn me a place at their table. Thanksgiving proved that I had never been family to them. I was infrastructure. I was the invisible system keeping their lights on while they laughed behind a closed door. About an hour into my drive, I pulled into a 24-hour gas station because the storm had worsened. While I waited for the road crews, I checked the family account I had created for emergencies. There should have been $28,000 in it. The balance was $814. I stared at the screen, convinced I was reading it wrong. Then I opened the transaction history. Over 11 months, dozens of transfers had been made to an unfamiliar company called North Ridge Consulting. The withdrawals ranged from $900 to $4,000. Each had been labeled as medical care, property tax, heating repairs, or my father's business expenses. The authorization code belonged to my sister. I had given her emergency access 2 years earlier when my mother underwent surgery. She had apparently never stopped using it. I searched the company name and found a business registration connected to my brother-in-law's personal address. Northridge Consulting had no website, no employees, and no public clients. It was a shell company. They hadn't merely taken advantage of my kindness. They had created a system to steal from me while convincing me I was protecting our parents. My hands began to shake, but not from grief. This was anger stripped of confusion. Suddenly, the Thanksgiving rejection made sense. They had not excluded me because they wanted a small gathering. They excluded me because several people at that dinner were connected to Northridge. They could not risk me asking questions. I downloaded every statement, saved screenshots of every transfer, and emailed copies to a secure account. Then I called my bank's fraud department. The representative asked whether I knew the person who had made the transfers. "She's my sister," I replied. Saying it aloud made the betrayal sound even worse. The representative froze the account, opened an investigation, and warned me not to confront anyone until their security team completed an initial review. Minutes later, my sister sent a new message. "Please call me before you do something you'll regret." I looked at the empty highway, the snow collecting along the windshield, and typed my first response of the night. "I've already seen Northridge Consulting." 3 dots appeared immediately. They vanished. Then appeared again. No message came. 5 minutes later, her husband called. I declined it. My sister called next. I declined that too. Finally, my mother sent a text that revealed more than she intended. "Whatever you found, we can explain. Don't involve your father." That sentence confirmed she knew. I had expected dishonesty from my sister and her husband, but I had still imagined my mother as a passive participant, someone who benefited without understanding. Instead, she had been protecting them. Maybe she had helped them. I thought about all the times she had called me crying over an urgent expense: the leaking roof, the hospital deductible, the property tax deadline. Had any of those emergencies been real? How many times had I worked late, canceled vacations, or delayed my own plans so people who mocked me could spend my money? At dawn, I checked into a roadside hotel. Before sleeping, I canceled the cabin's internet, television service, propane delivery, snow removal contract, and maintenance plan. The cabin was legally owned by my parents, but every recurring expense had been charged to me. I did not take anything that belonged to them. I simply stopped volunteering to carry it. By then, the missed calls had reached 62. The 63rd came from my father. His voicemail was only 9 seconds long. "Haley, I don't know what they did, but don't believe everything your mother tells you." I replayed it 3 times. My father had sounded frightened, but not surprised. And for the first time that night, I wondered whether he was another liar or another victim. I returned home the next afternoon and placed the untouched pie in my freezer. I didn't want to eat it or throw it away. It reminded me of the woman I had been: hopeful, useful, and willing to cross a snowstorm for people who would not open a door. On Monday, I met a financial crimes attorney named Dana Whitmore. I brought bank statements, messages, payment records, and the registration for Northridge Consulting. After reviewing everything, she asked whether I had ever authorized my sister to transfer money into her husband's company. When I said no, she explained that this could involve fraud, unauthorized access, falsified records, and possible tax violations. Hearing legal terms attached to my family cleared away the emotional fog. The law did not care that my sister was younger, favored, or supposedly sensitive. It cared whether she had permission. She did not. Dana told me to document everything, so I created a timeline. At 26, I co-signed an apartment for my sister, and she stopped paying after 4 months. At 29, I gave my parents money for a roof repair that insurance had already covered. At 31, my sister claimed her husband needed surgery, so I sent $12,000. The operation had already been paid through insurance. Every time I discovered the truth, my mother warned that refusing forgiveness would destroy the family. They had turned forgiveness into an accounting system. Each apology erased the debt, and I was expected to deposit more. That evening, my mother invited me to a video call titled Family Emergency. Dana listened silently on another line. My mother sat in the cabin kitchen beside my sister while her husband paced behind them. My father was nowhere visible. My sister immediately accused me of freezing accounts they depended on. I asked what Northridge Consulting actually did. She said, business development, but could not name a single client. I shared my screen and displayed $27,000 in transfers from my emergency account. Nobody spoke. Then my sister claimed they intended to repay me. I reminded her that they had bought a boat in June. Her husband called it an investment. I asked whether calling me a clown was also part of their investment strategy. My mother interrupted, saying everyone had made mistakes. I didn't make a mistake, I replied. I stood outside while you ate dinner in a cabin I was paying to maintain. My sister admitted investors had attended Thanksgiving and said I made people uncomfortable when I discussed money. Dana messaged me to ask for names. They refused. When I said the bank could identify the guests through the transfers, panic crossed my brother-in-law's face. My mother ordered me to withdraw the complaint, restore the payments, stop speaking to lawyers, and keep everything private for my father's health. I asked what was wrong with him. She gave vague answers and could not name his doctor. My sister shouted that my obsession with receipts was why nobody wanted me at Thanksgiving. There it was. I remembered things. I asked questions. I could not be manipulated once I saw the numbers. After the call, Dana warned me not to communicate with them alone again. The next morning, I published a blog entry about the difference between generosity and financial coercion. I used no names, but the post spread quickly. Hundreds of readers shared similar experiences. One anonymous account commented that people often rewrite family history to look innocent. The profile picture showed part of my sister's kitchen. 3 days later, Dana called. Northridge had paid 2 men who attended Thanksgiving, a real estate broker and an employee of the title company holding a lien on my parents' cabin. She believed they were preparing to sell or refinance the property using fraudulent documents. The cabin was not merely where they rejected me. It was where they had been planning the next stage of the fraud. Dana obtained documents showing that someone had recently applied for an additional $300,000 loan against the cabin. The application listed me as a willing guarantor and included an electronic signature that resembled mine. It was forged. The contact email differed from mine by 1 letter, and the phone number belonged to Northridge Consulting. My sister and her husband had not only drained my emergency account, they had tried to attach my income and credit to a new loan without permission. Thanksgiving had included a broker, a title employee, and a private investor interested in part of the property. My presence would have threatened the deal, so they needed me embarrassed and gone. They believed humiliation would keep me quiet. I filed an identity theft report and gave the lender a sworn statement. The refinancing stopped, the title employee was suspended, the investor withdrew, and Northridge's accounts came under review. My brother-in-law emailed me, claiming an assistant had added my signature by mistake, even though his company had no registered employees. He offered to return $6,000 if I restored the family payments and told the lender there had been confusion. Dana replied that all future communication must go through counsel. My mother then began calling relatives, telling them I had abandoned my sick father and frozen money needed for his medication. An aunt called me vindictive. A cousin said lawyers should never be involved in family disagreements. Nobody asked why a disagreement required forged documents. I ignored them and published another blog entry titled, "The Emergency They Create When You Stop Paying." It explained how manipulators turn consequences into crises and use illness, guilt, relatives, and public shame to restore financial access. A local educator reposted it, and a regional radio host quoted it during a segment on family financial abuse. My mother called immediately. She accused me of trying to destroy them. I reminded her that I had used no names. "People know," she replied. I asked how they knew. She had no answer. Only guilty people recognized themselves. When she again claimed my father was seriously ill, I asked for his hospital records. She accused me of distrusting my own mother. "I don't trust you," I said. Her crying stopped almost instantly. She said my sister's marriage could collapse because her husband blamed her for giving me too much information. When I asked what information she meant, she tried to change the subject. My sister grabbed the phone and accused me of jealousy. I refused to argue about childhood. "This is about who used my signature," I said. She went silent. When I asked whether it was her or her husband, she whispered, "You don't know what he's capable of." Worry, then ended the call. Later, she asked to meet alone and promised to tell me everything. Dana arranged a meeting in a public restaurant while waiting nearby. My sister arrived looking exhausted and delivered a polished apology. She admitted closing the cabin door had been cruel, blamed her husband's message on alcohol, and said she missed me. I asked about the forged signature. She finally admitted that her husband's business was drowning in debt and that my mother had supported using the cabin to save it. She claimed she had only forwarded him an old document containing my signature. When I asked why she had done that, she said he promised it was temporary. She offered to give me evidence against him if I withdrew the report and restored the payments. Before I could answer, her phone lit up with a message from her husband. Did she agree? Don't leave without getting it recorded. The meeting was another trap. They wanted audio they could edit into proof that I controlled the family financially. I stood to leave. My sister grabbed my arm and announced that our father had collapsed that morning. She smiled faintly, believing she had found the one threat that could still control me. I called the hospital from the parking lot. My father had been admitted, but not for a heart attack. He had suffered dehydration, severe anxiety, and a dangerous reaction caused by mixing medications. One prescription had been filled days earlier through a clinic he had never visited. The medical crisis was real, but someone had helped create it. I went to the hospital without notifying my mother or sister. My father looked frail and ashamed. His first words were, "I'm sorry." He explained that after Thanksgiving, my mother had taken control of his medications because he was supposedly too stressed to manage them. A new bottle appeared in his organizer, and he assumed his doctor had changed the dosage. He became dizzy and confused, but my mother delayed taking him to the hospital. A neighbor finally called an ambulance. My father admitted he knew Northridge was failing and had discovered the refinancing plan before Thanksgiving. He refused to sign, and my mother assured him the plan had been abandoned. He never warned me because he was ashamed and believed I would eventually rescue everyone. I told him that illness did not erase his choices. I would help arrange proper medical care, but I would not pay the cabin mortgage, cover business debts, or withdraw the investigation. He accepted that. Then he handed me a flash drive containing files copied from my mother's computer. Dana reviewed them that night. They showed that my mother had coordinated the manipulation for years. She kept a spreadsheet estimating how much money I could provide without becoming suspicious. One column was labeled Haley Resistance Level. Another listed pressure tactics: father's health, holiday guilt, sister in crisis, and family reputation. The forged loan had been planned for months. My mother wrote that I would complain, but eventually protect the family, as always. My sister recommended excluding me from Thanksgiving because I had started requesting receipts. Her husband suggested humiliating me if I arrived, believing embarrassment would keep me silent. The messages about my father were even worse. After he opposed the loan, my mother wrote that they might need medical documentation showing he lacked the capacity to manage the property. A clinic connected to one of Northridge's investors issued the new medication without examining him. Whether they intended to harm him or merely make him appear confused remained unclear, but he nearly died. The evidence expanded the investigation. My father revoked my mother's medical authority and agreed to cooperate. When she discovered I had visited him, she called from the hospital lobby and accused me of turning him against her. I told her the emails had done that. Then she made her true beliefs unmistakable. "Your sister has more to lose than you," she said. "You're unmarried, you don't have children, you can rebuild your finances." My savings were not considered the result of work or sacrifice. They were treated as spare resources belonging to people whose lives she valued more. "You didn't protect her," I said. "You taught her that consequences belong to someone else." The next day, my brother-in-law disappeared. His vehicle was found near an airport, and 2 Northridge accounts had been emptied. He left my sister responsible for unpaid taxes, vendor claims, and personal guarantees exceeding $400,000. She called me crying, asking me to come to the cabin because creditors were threatening legal action. I told her to contact an attorney. She said she could not afford one. "Sell the boat," I replied. It had already been repossessed. She begged me to remember we were sisters. I reminded her that she had forged my signature, stolen my money, helped manipulate our father, and tried to secretly record me. She blamed our mother and her husband. I told her she was 31 and responsible for her own choices. The only help I offered was cooperation with investigators. She refused because it might expose her role. "Then you've chosen your consequence," I said. Soon afterward, foreclosure proceedings began on the cabin. My mother posted online that her oldest daughter had frozen family funds during a medical crisis and forced her parents from their home. With Dana's approval, I published redacted screenshots of the resistance spreadsheet and the forged signature report. I still used no names. My mother deleted her post within an hour. I later spoke anonymously on the radio about financial abuse within families. By then, the truth was clear. I had not destroyed my family by stopping the payments. I had simply stopped shielding the system that was already destroying us. 3 weeks after Thanksgiving, my sister asked me to meet her at the cabin before the foreclosure inspection. My father's attorney needed several personal documents from the property, and investigators believed original loan papers might still be stored in my brother-in-law's office. I agreed to go only after arranging for Dana, my father's representative, and a county deputy to arrive shortly after me. My sister believed I was coming alone. When I reached the cabin, a foreclosure notice was taped beside the same door she had once closed in my face. Inside, boxes covered the floor, furniture had been sold, and collection notices filled the kitchen. My mother sat at the dining table gripping a folder. She immediately asked whether I was enjoying their suffering. Then she demanded that I pay the overdue balance and stop the foreclosure. Even surrounded by evidence of fraud, she still believed the solution was my bank account. I refused. My sister proposed that I sell my city apartment, use the money to save the cabin and settle Northridge's debts, then rent somewhere smaller. I asked what she planned to sacrifice. She gestured around the cabin as though losing property she had never paid for made her heroic. "I'm losing everything," she said. "You already spent what you're losing," I replied. My mother accused her husband of deceiving everyone. I asked whether he had created the spreadsheet on her computer or written the messages instructing her to use my father's health against me. She had no answer. When I said their real crisis was learning to live without stealing from me, my mother stood and slapped me. I stepped back and looked toward the driveway as the deputy and Dana arrived. My mother's face drained of color. "You set us up," my sister whispered. "No. I documented you." My father's representative presented authorization to collect his belongings. Dana asked my mother to surrender the folder. She refused, but my sister lunged for it, sending pages across the floor. They included original loan drafts, copies of my signature, blank medical forms, and handwritten pressure strategies. One page outlined how to claim my father lacked capacity so my mother could control the cabin. My sister stared at the evidence and accused our mother of lying about destroying it. Their alliance immediately collapsed. My sister learned that our mother had warned her husband about the investigation, giving him time to move money and disappear. My mother claimed she had only tried to protect the family. My sister accused her of protecting him while leaving her with the debt. They began exposing each other. My sister admitted that humiliating me on Thanksgiving had been our mother's idea. My mother revealed that my sister had laughed about using my income for the refinance. My sister disclosed several false medical emergencies. My mother accused her of keeping more stolen money than she admitted. For years, they had been united by access to me. Once that access disappeared, resentment tore them apart. My father joined by video call from rehabilitation. He asked my mother whether she had helped his son-in-law escape. She admitted warning him, but denied knowing his location. My father told her their marriage was over, and that he had already instructed an attorney to protect his remaining assets. He then asked my sister whether she had given her husband my signature. She admitted she had. "Then you answer for it," he said. My mother looked at me as though I had caused everything. "You lost your family," she said. I looked around the empty cabin and the scattered documents. "No. I lost the job you called family." Then I collected my father's belongings and walked out. The cabin was sold at auction 2 months later. After the mortgage, liens, unpaid taxes, and legal expenses were deducted, almost nothing remained. My mother moved into a small rental owned by one of her cousins, though the arrangement lasted only 3 months because she refused to contribute consistently. She eventually took a part-time administrative job, her first paid employment in more than 20 years. Relatives who had once condemned me became noticeably quiet after investigators interviewed several of them about loans they had been encouraged to invest in through North Ridge. Some apologized, most simply disappeared. I accepted neither apology nor disappearance as proof that they understood what happened. They had believed the first story because it allowed them to pressure the person least likely to fight back. When I did fight back, they called it cruelty. My sister faced civil claims from creditors and criminal scrutiny over the unauthorized transfers and forged documents. She eventually agreed to cooperate with investigators in exchange for consideration of her role and provided access to encrypted messages revealing where her husband had moved part of the money. He was located several months later using a false business identity. His arrest did not restore the stolen funds, repair our family, or erase the night outside the cabin. Revenge rarely restores what was taken. What it can do is remove the thief's certainty that you will remain silent. My sister avoided the most severe charges by cooperating, but she did not escape the consequences. Her marriage ended. Her SUV was repossessed. The boat was sold. She declared bankruptcy and moved into a small apartment above a laundromat. For the first time in her adult life, she had to calculate rent, food, insurance, and transportation without assuming I would cover the shortage. She sent me a letter 6 months after Thanksgiving. It was 12 pages long. The first 4 pages described how frightened and controlled she had felt in her marriage. The next 5 blamed our mother for teaching her that I existed to solve problems. Only near the end did she write, "I chose to participate." That sentence was the first honest thing she had given me. She asked whether we could someday rebuild our relationship. I replied with 3 lines. "I believe you were manipulated, and I also believe you manipulated me. Both can be true. I am not ready for a relationship, and I may never be." I did not include money. I did not provide encouragement designed to ease her guilt. I did not promise a future version of forgiveness. Boundaries are not punishments that expire when the other person becomes uncomfortable. They are decisions about what access someone may have after showing how they use it. My mother never apologized. She wrote twice, once to accuse me of breaking up her marriage, and once to ask whether I would pay the deposit on a better apartment. I did not respond. My father completed rehabilitation and moved into a modest senior community near his brother. He paid his own expenses. At first, he attempted to turn every conversation into an apology. I told him remorse mattered only when accompanied by changed behavior. He began therapy, created a transparent financial plan, and stopped asking me to communicate with my mother or sister on his behalf. Our relationship did not magically heal. We spoke once a week, then twice a month. Some conversations were warm, others were awkward. I did not become his caretaker. I was his daughter, and that distinction protected both of us. He once asked whether I regretted canceling everything. I thought about the question carefully. I regretted driving through a snowstorm because I believed a surprise pie could repair years of disrespect. I regretted ignoring stolen money because confrontation felt more dangerous than overwork. I regretted confusing endurance with love, but I did not regret canceling a single payment. The mortgage, insurance, utilities, car loan, subscriptions, emergency transfers, and maintenance contracts had formed a financial web tying me to people who resented me while depending on me. Canceling them did not make me heartless. It made their choices visible. My blog continued growing. What began as a private account of betrayal became a resource about financial boundaries, identity theft within families, coercive guilt, and documentation. I worked with financial counselors and attorneys to create guides for readers who suspected relatives were using their accounts or credit. I always included an important warning. Emotional certainty is not enough. Save records. Review statements. Contact qualified professionals. Protecting yourself does not require public revenge, impulsive confrontation, or illegal retaliation. My revenge was not destroying their property or humiliating them with secrets. It was refusing to hide what they had done and allowing lawful consequences to reach them. A year after that Thanksgiving, I baked another pecan pie. This one was for a small dinner at my apartment with friends, colleagues, and 2 women I had met through the blog. Nobody expected me to pay their rent. Nobody measured my worth by the emergencies I could solve. When the doorbell rang, I opened the door completely. For a moment, I remembered standing outside the cabin with snow collecting on my shoulders as laughter continued behind the door. Back then, I thought the worst part was being excluded. I was wrong. The worst part was that I had spent years buying access to people who enjoyed reminding me that it could still be denied. My sister's accidental text freed me because it revealed the contempt beneath every request for help. What a clown. She actually showed up. He had been right about one thing. I had shown up again and again, long after they proved they did not deserve it. I showed up with money, solutions, forgiveness, and silence. But I was not a clown for loving my family. I would only have been a fool if I continued funding their cruelty after seeing it clearly. Before dinner, my father called. He wished me a happy Thanksgiving and told me he had cooked for several residents in his community. He did not ask where I was, who was with me, or whether I could send anything. He simply said he hoped I had a peaceful evening. I do, I replied. After the call, I placed my phone face down. There were no missed calls from my mother, no desperate messages from my sister, no fraudulent transfers waiting for approval. The silence that once frightened me now felt earned. People sometimes ask whether my family losing the cabin made me feel victorious. It didn't. A building is only a symbol. Their real loss was the person who had protected them from every consequence. They lost the daughter who canceled plans to handle their crises, the sister who transferred money without contracts, and the woman who accepted humiliation because she feared being alone. That version of me never returned from the snowstorm. The woman who drove home understood that love without respect becomes exploitation, forgiveness without accountability becomes permission, and family without boundaries becomes a debt no amount of money can repay. My mother once said I would have to live with myself if I refused to save them. She was right. I live with myself every day. I live in a home nobody can mortgage using my forged signature. I live with savings nobody can rename as a family emergency. I live with friendships that do not require payment, work I am proud of, and a voice that no longer disappears when someone cries. Most importantly, I live without waiting outside closed doors. So, what would you have done after receiving that message? Would you have restored the payments to keep the peace, or would you have allowed them to experience the life they built with your money? I once believed walking away meant I had lost my family. Now I understand the truth. I did not cancel everything because I hated them. I canceled everything because they had canceled my place in the family long before I ever opened my banking app. The only difference was that my decision finally came with consequences.
We hope the fictional story left you with something thoughtful to carry forward. This video was created only for education, entertainment, and reflection. We hope it reminds you that sometimes people do not change because they are sorry. They change the behavior only when they lose access to what you provided. Knowing the difference can protect you from repeating the same cycle.